Okay, let's do a review on the 1983 World Champion Baltimore Orioles. Let's get into the offense and see how those numbers look. Let's look at the top of the order. You had a platoon in center field in the leadoff spot where you had John Shelby playing against lefties, and Al Bummery versus righties. Dan Ford would hit second every day playing right field. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all of their numbers all together. I wish the on base numbers for Bummery and Shelby were a little bit higher, especially Shelby's number. I'm not crazy about that number at all. But at least in the two hole, you're looking pretty solid with Dan Ford with his on base numbers. Now let's get into the meat of the order. First, let me spend a little time talking about Cal Ripken. This was obviously his 1983 MVP season. I'm going to show you all of his numbers, his on base chances, and his hits with multiple base advancement. Obviously, the centerpiece of the 1983 Baltimore Orioles lineup. Just terrific card out of Cal Ripken for 1983. Next, I'm going to show you the cleanup guy, Eddie Murray. I'm going to show you his hits with multiple base advancement. The one thing that really sticks out about Eddie Murray's card is the number of ballpark effect home runs that he has on his card. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of the ballpark effects for Memorial Stadium in 1983, home runs on a D20 for a left-handed hitter is a 1 through 16, and for a right-handed hitter, it is only 1 through 4. And Eddie Murray does have a number of ballpark effect home runs on his card, particularly when he hits left-handed, when he's facing right-handed pitching. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. But I'm still a little surprised at the low numbers for Eddie Murray, especially a guy who is such a great run producer like like he was. I would have always thought that his numbers would have been more around the 6-7 mark, but that's what you get out of Eddie Murray's 1983 Strat-O-Matic card. Now let's take a look at the left field platoon. Gary Renicky would play against lefties, and John Lowenstein would play against righties. Let me show you their hits with multiple base advancement. Gary Renicky actually hit with some decent power that year. He had 19 home runs that year, a lot of power on Gary Renicky's card from 1983. So the left field platoon, you're looking pretty solid right there. And just to give you an idea, Renicky, Lowenstein, platoon in left field, and they both hit fifth in the lineup right behind Eddie Murray. Now let's look at the number 6 hitter, the designated hitter, Ken Singleton. You see his hits with multiple base advancement, and I really like these numbers from Singleton, especially when you consider the fact that he's penciled in as the number 6 hitter. So I do like that production in that slot in the lineup. So those are nice numbers out of Ken Singleton. So if we're to look at the 1983 Orioles offense as a whole, you're going to see that they grade out at a good score of a 3.5 out of 5. I'm was not crazy about the on base numbers that you get out of the leadoff guys, John Shelby and Al Bummery. That number was salvaged a little bit by Dan Ford hitting second. And you get some pretty solid on base numbers out of guys like Ripken, Murray, obviously Gary Renicky, and John Lowenstein was always a on base machine. But the score is tilted towards what you get out of the 1 and 2 guys. So that's why the on base score is only a 3 out of 5. And you see, I gave the middle of the order a above average score of a 3.5. And the righty lefty mix, I gave that a good score of a 4 out of 5 because I do like the fact that you have two very capable switch hitters in the order, obviously with Eddie Murray and Ken Singleton. Neither one are really impacted adversely by facing lefties or righties. Very consistent cards throughout. And you have the nice righty lefty platoon in left field with Gary Renicky and John Lowenstein. So a decent score for the 1983 Orioles offense. They grade out at a 3.5 out of 5. Now let's take a look at the defense. Let's start up the middle like we always do. Second base, shortstop, where you have Dower at second and Ripken at short. Very good numbers out of Dower and Ripken, no issues there when you got two twos up the middle. Let's look at the outfield defense. This is where the scoring can get a little bit complicated because you do have a lot of platooning in the outfield between left field and center field. And this is where we have a little bit of an issue because when Al Bumry plays, he's a 4 in center. You're not crazy about that. So when you are facing a right-handed pitcher, you look at the Orioles outfield, you go 3 in left, 4 in center, 3 in right, which is really not what you want. However, when you face left-handed pitching, you've got Shelby in center and Renicky in left. That makes the 3 in right a lot more tolerable. So it really does depend on who you're playing and who you're facing that particular day. Let's look at the E ratings on the 1983 Orioles. Let's stay in the outfield. At least the outfield E ratings are all in line. No issues with any of the E ratings you get in the outfield. The middle infield E ratings, Ripken's number is a decent number. He doesn't hit that E26, which is really kind of like my breaking point when it comes to shortstops. I don't like any numbers above an E26 at short, just like I don't like E ratings over an E24 at third. So you're looking pretty good there. Big issue with the E ratings on the 1983 Orioles is what you get out of the corners. They have Eddie Murray as an E11, but the real issue is the third baseman, Todd Cruz. That is really not a number that you want at third base at all. And it's really too bad because it really drags down the overall E rating score. Because just to give you an idea of how I broke down the E ratings, I gave the outfield a 4.5 out of 5, middle infield a 4 out of 5, and the corners I had to grade below average as a 1.5 out of 5 because I'm not happy with the E rating at third and the double digit E rating at first base. And I will drop a suggestion later on in the video as to how, if you are playing with the 1983 Orioles, you could kind of mask the issue at third base. But as we look at the defense as a whole, you're going to see that they grade out at a 3.6 out of 5. And it's really too bad because the issues with the 83 Orioles defense is the outfield defense when they face right-handed pitching and the defense you have every day at third. Those are the real issues with the 83 Orioles defense. Now let's get into the starting rotation for the Orioles. Let's get started with the ace, Scott McGregor. I'm going to show you his on-base chance numbers right there. Those numbers check out very nicely. The only issue I take with his card is that there is a little bit of a power issue with him facing right-handed batters. It's not over the top like you see on some cards, but that could be a little bit of an issue for Scott McGregor. Now let's look at the starting rotation depth. Let me show you the numbers for Mike Flanagan, Storm Davis, and Mike Boddicker. You see all those numbers check out very, very good for 2, 3, and 4 starters. One thing about Mike Boddicker, he too has a little bit of an issue with power against right-handed hitters. Again, it's not over the top, but it's still something to watch out for. So if we're to look at the 1983 Orioles starting rotation as a whole, I graded them out at a very, very good score of a 4.5 out of 5. Now let's take a look at the bullpen. Let's first take a look at the closer, Tippy Martinez. You see his on-base chance numbers right there. Now let's look at the bullpen depth. I'm going to show you the numbers for Sammy Stewart, Tim Stoddard, and Dan Morigiello. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that last name incorrectly. The first thing I'll say about the Orioles bullpen depth is Tim Stoddard is a guy that you basically use as a mop-up guy in this bullpen. You got to remember, by 1983, Tim Stoddard was towards the end of his career. He had some terrific cards in the 1970s when he was in his prime, but by 1983, he was towards the latter half of his career. So he just has way, way too much power on his card on top of those on base numbers that you see on the screen. Sammy Stewart, his numbers, his on base numbers are just okay. I'm not particularly crazy about the 10 out of 33 against left-handed hitters, especially considering the fact that he's a righty. But the one good thing that I would say about his card is that at least he keeps the ball in the ballpark. Now, if you look at lefty Dan Morigiello, you got a lefty here who is very, very effective at getting left-handed hitters out. And this is always a nice option to have in the bullpen. It's always nice to have that guy that you could bring in a big spot in, let's say, the fifth, sixth, or even seventh inning to get a lefty or two out. And you see, he has solid numbers against right-handed hitters as well. So I would strongly suggest using Morigiello in a big role in your bullpen to be the bridge to get you the ball to Tippy Martinez. So if we're to look at the 1983 Orioles bullpen as a whole, you'll see that they grade out at a very nice score of a 4.1 out of 5. As I gave the ace Tippy Martinez a very good score of a 4.5 out of 5, and I gave the bullpen depth a good score of a 3.75 out of 5. I just didn't think the bullpen depth was good enough to approach a 4, but I do like the fact that you get decent numbers on base numbers out of Sammy Stewart. And like I spoke on before, he's very effective at keeping the ball in the ballpark. And I do like the numbers that you get out of Morigiello, your lefty setup guy out of the bullpen. So if we're to look at the 1983 Orioles as a whole, you're going to see that they grade out at a very good score of a 3.9 out of 5. They fall just below that magical 4 out of 5 number. And really, the only thing that really kept them from hitting that 4 out of 5 or even going slightly above a 4 were the issues that they have sometimes in the field. And I say sometimes because, as I spoke on before, you have serious issues with the outfield defense when you face right handed pitching, and you have an issue at third base. So, what I would suggest doing if you're playing with the 1983 Orioles, because I just don't think Todd Cruz has the hitting card to justify his defense at third base. What I would actually suggest doing is just play Len Sakata at second base, who actually, believe it or not, has better numbers than Rich Dower defensively at second base, and just move Dower over to third. You could easily do that to fix your issue with third base defense. And as far as what you could do in the outfield, well, you could probably just play John Shelby every day in center field if you really want to shy away from playing a 4 in center field, which I've done many times. Unless a guy just has an absolute killer Strat-O-Matic card, you're not going to get me to play a 4 in center field. there's no chance of that happening. So, but anyway, that's my grade on the 1983 World Champion Baltimore Orioles. They grade out at a good score of a 3.9 out of 5. Once again, I thank you all for watching. It is greatly appreciated. And my next video will be on the 1982 American League champion Milwaukee Brewers. Have a good day, everyone.